As investor at Founders Fund, Trey Stephen puts it, fundraising is a skill that you can develop over time through practice and through a systematic practice. And that's what this system is about. That's a fundraising CRM system built in Airtable. That's what we are looking at in this specific video. And it's meant to be a systematic way to practice your fundraising skills so that you can systematically reach out to investors and keep track of all your interactions and documentation to leverage for later rounds as well. And the aim of this system is to make sure that you can leverage your system as a competitive advantage to actually fundraise successfully whatever round you are in. And that's the Airtable base that we are looking at, that is called Fundraising CRM, and that's what you will get with this specific Airtable template. It is built in Airtable, so it is a database essentially composed of multiple related tables, and it works best on the Pro plan, very likely because of the limitations in terms of the records that you can have in each table on the free plan. For starter, the free plan is definitely enough, however, to test this out especially. In this Airtable base, there are 4 key tables. Each table has multiple views that you can access from the sidebar menu. There is a clear workflow to follow that is behind this whole system. And in addition to the foundational tables, there are also automations running in the background and triggered by specific events. And there are also interfaces, that is a dashboard that displays graphs and data, aggregated data from the interactions, contacts, and outreach that you do to your investors for specific companies. So let's go through each table here. Now we'll look at the views, the structure of the tables, automations, and finally we'll conclude with interfaces to see everything together. The first table in the base is contacts. Contacts are individuals that you reach out to. They are people that are in your network, and they may become investors or maybe not. And the fundamental workflow behind this table, that is the core table in the whole system, is that at first you can upload contacts in the all contacts view. That's where you can see all the contacts. They are sorted by name ascending. You can search for contacts right here directly. You can also filter contacts using the filter option. And you can upload as many contacts as you like at first. If you want, you can also use the add feature to upload them in bulk, where you see under the data section, you can import from Excel, from Google Sheet, from a CSV file. You can also paste table data. And that table is particularly optimized for this to ensure that you match the columns from the source table or Google Sheet, where you copy the data, to the destination table in Airtable in particular. And once you upload those contacts or add singular contacts from this button here, then the first step can start. That is a first screening process. And the idea behind this is that maybe the person that uploads the contacts and that finds contacts that might be a fit is different from the person that screens the contacts in your system. So in here you can have a whole list of contacts, and each contact will then be screened in the first screening view. That is a Kanban board view, where you can see we have different statuses. It can be approved, keep for later, and not a fit. By default, when a contact is uploaded to the system, it will be uncategorized. And that means that the person responsible for the first screening needs to decide whether that contact is approved, so we can start the reach out process and then follow up over time with the investor. Or we want to keep for later if maybe it's an investor that is only interested in later rounds than where we are currently at. Or it could be just not a fit, in which case we will not start any outreach for this investor. You can see here we can already see some data on the card directly, like email, the funder status, the company related to the contact, as well as the contact owner. And when opening a card or a record in Airtable, you can then see here on the right menu, you can see all the activity on this particular record, meaning the edits made and when it was created. And you can also see comments right here, where you can collaborate with other team members on a specific record or contact. And you can see a revision history. On the main record view, you can see all the specific fields associated with this contact. Some are visible by default, some other are hidden, but you can expand them right there. You can see that each contact has a contact owner, meaning a team member that is responsible for interacting with that contact. There is a company that you can link here, and that comes from the companies table. There is another table that you can see here at the very top as a tab. So each contact can be linked to one or multiple companies, which you can add here from add the firm. You can see a list of existing companies in your companies table, or you can directly create a new firm from here. And when you create that firm, that will end up in the companies table, because that's a relational field. There is a website, the email address, the funnel status, and you can see here a description of what this means when you hover over this field. The funnel status is the second stage in the pipeline. That means once you do the first screening, if a contact is approved, then it will start ending up in the funnel status. It needs a funnel status because the funnel status is where the main outreach and follow-ups happen. So the first funnel status, when you reach out to an investor the first time, will be materials sent. That means the first reach out has been made, and that's where you will see the funnel pipeline later on and what that looks like. Then there is also the most recent interaction. That's a date. That is a roll-up field taken from the interactions relation field, because each contact has multiple interactions over time, or at least one. So when you reach out to a contact, you can record your interaction here, just like that, by adding a new interaction here. And you can do create a new record. And that's the record here. You will select a date, let's say today. The type of interaction, that could be meeting, email, phone call. Let's say that's a phone call. The contact that will be automatically linked. And you can add any notes that it makes you and your team ensure that you understand what's the context behind this interaction and what are next steps that might have happened. In addition, you can also link to existing documents in your wiki or internal documentation if you send, for example, a pitch deck or a specific document to pitch your company to the investor. And now this interaction is recorded in the interaction table. You can see here the name is a formula that is automatically calculated by concatenating the date plus name of contact plus the type of interaction. And you can see that for this contact, Tayana Lee, we have done 3 different interactions over time. So there are 3 interactions. The number of days since the last interaction is 0, because today was the latest interaction, and the most recent interaction indeed is today. And this gives you an overview of where you're at with this contact. In addition, you have other fields right here that you can fill out to specify more details about the contact specifically. And that is for contacts, all the fields that we have, as well as the first screening. Once the first screening is done and the contact is approved, that will end up in the funnel. That is the main funnel view, where you can see all the contacts based on the funnel status. And the funnel status is what's the reach out status and your interactions with that contact. So from materials sent, that is the first interaction, you can go through a meeting that you might have scheduled with the potential investor, follow-up meetings, temp sheet, diligence, closing process, and if they have invested, that's what this status is about. Or if they said no, or if there is no response. And these are all the statuses that we have right here in the main funnel view. The funnel follow-up board is instead a version of the funnel pipeline specifically made for following up. Whatever contact appears in this view needs follow-up. And that's because we use a special filter to make sure that we only show those contacts where the funnel status is not no response, it is not say no, it is approved, and where the total interactions is less than 3 or empty, and where the number of days since the last interaction is greater or equal than 4 or empty. And this ensures that we do not follow up with the same contact too many times, because if we have more than 3 interactions and there is no response, there is no need to follow up with that contact again. you can just move the status to no response or said no and move on to other contacts and focusing on people that might be really interested in the investment. And that's the idea of the funnel status. So if someone is in material sent, for example, and let's see Michael Lee, I can see here there are 0 interactions. So we need to follow up with this. And we can add an interaction right here. Adding record, we want to create a record here. Let's say that's today. And that was an email that we sent to Michael Lee. And we sent the short form pitch deck. That's the interaction here. And since now the latest interaction is today from Michael Lee, that contact has disappeared from the funnel follow-up. In 3 days, if there is no response or no updates to the contact, that contact will show up again on this funnel follow-up view to make sure that you do not forget to follow up with that contact. At the same time, you can always find that contact in the main funnel view right here, because this one doesn't have any advanced filters besides the simple funnel status and primary status logic. And that's the fundamental workflow for following up with contacts and ensuring that you have a systematic way to keep track of your pipeline. In addition to these key views, you also can see contacts by investment type, where each type is a toggle that you can expand and collapse like that. By company, where each company is a toggle again. And by contact owner, that is the internal team member responsible for reaching out and staying in touch with the contact. The companies table is more of a supporting table. Each company can have one or multiple contacts related to it. You can see companies here have a website, a portfolio, a Crunchbase URL, focus areas that you can select from a list. That is a multi-select field. There is a location that you can select here or add new ones. And there are contacts, that is a relational field, and some rolled up counts of total contacts and contacts who actually invested. And within contacts, you can also enter the amount that they invested in the dedicated field right here. And that's all data that will then flow into the interfaces and dashboards where you can see data at a glance and through charts. So it is key to actually use these fields to the best possible abilities that you have, because then all the data that is clean and appropriate will flow into dashboards and will give you enough important data to actually understand what's the situation and what you can do to improve and where. The interactions table is sort of backend, because as you saw, the workflow is that interactions are mostly added from the contact record. When you expand the record and you reach out to a contact, that's when you can create an interaction right there. And interactions are going to be displayed in this table, that is the backend table, and you can see interactions in different formats, such as in a calendar based on the date, but also by type and by contact. And finally, the wiki is the internal documentation table, where you can store pitch decks, templates for email reach outs based on the specific stage that you're reaching out for, as well as internal SOPs or any kind of documentation that can help team members and yourself using the system in the most optimal and effective way, scalably over time. So each record here is a document, but you can define what type of document that is. You can write down notes. So if it's a template, that's where you can write down exactly what's the text to be customized and used as a template. Here you can drop attachment files, and you can see that wiki documents are related to interactions. And that's because when you create an interaction, you can also define what document you sent or what template you used for that interaction. And that is really it for tables that you can browse through here. And you can understand that the contacts table really is where all the action happens. All the other tables are mostly supporting tables that make sure that the system runs smoothly and you have enough data then in the future to have a proper system that scales over time. Now let's get into automations. Automations are off right now in this template. You can turn them on if you believe that they are useful. And there are two automations here. One is for follow-up reminders, and the other one is for updating a status automatically. Follow-up reminders is a way to notify the contact owner via email when a follow-up is due. And you can see here that the trigger is when a record enters a view, and the view is the funnel follow-up. We saw this before. A record only enters a funnel follow-up when specific conditions are met, and there has been enough time that you haven't reached out to that contact. And that is the trigger for this automation. And the action is that when a record enters that view, then we send an email to the contact owner to say that it is time to follow up with that person, or at least to update the record in Airtable to make sure that the information is up to date as to where you are at in terms of the interactions and overall relationship with that person. And you can also customize here, if you like, the content of the email. That uses some variables as well as HTML tags to format the email properly. To turn the automation on, you can just switch this toggle. And the second email is to update the status automatically. And that is when a record matches a specific condition that you can find here. There is a filter that says when total interactions is greater or equal than 3, and the funnel status is not closing, said no, and no response, and the number of days since last interaction is greater or equal than 4. If those conditions are met, all of them are met, then we update the contact record, and the funnel status will be set to no response. So that's an automated way to ensure that you don't need to manually change the status of a contact every time. If you believe that only 3 reach outs or total interactions is not enough, you can just come here and you can update the number of interactions. That is it for automations, and you can create additional automations right here. And finally, there are interfaces, and there is one interface, in fact, in this fundraising CRM, and that is a dashboard that shows charts and aggregated data from your key tables, contacts, companies, interactions, and wiki, mostly focusing on contacts because that's where the main data lives. At the very top, you can see 3 core numbers. That is the total investors, meaning people who actually invested money, people who are in the invested status. You can see the total amount invested, that is taken from the amount funded field in the contacts table. And there is the percentage of contacts who invested, that is people in the invested status over total contacts. And that is a percentage right there. In addition, you can see here the amount invested by contact owner. So what contact owner within your team is closing the most deals, if you want to think of it like that. And that over time can tell you about some patterns or maybe some skills in terms of fundraising from some people specifically in your team. The amount invested by type is a bar chart that shows the type of investment on the x-axis and the total amount of investment on the y-axis. And you can see that right now we have $500,000 of equity investment. An additional chart here is median interactions by contact owner. So how many interactions each contact owner has over time on average, or better, the median of those interactions. And you can see right now there is only one contact owner in my template. But when you have multiple team members, especially for later rounds, this can provide relevant data for how you're doing in terms of interactions and how long it takes for you to turn a contact into an investor. Here is a pie chart of interaction type percentages, where each interaction type is a slice of the pie, and you can see the percentage value of the weight of that interaction type over total interactions. And finally, the final graph is another pie chart that is percentage of contacts who invested by owner. And this is not very meaningful in this current state in the template, because we only have one contact owner and one investor. But when you have many team members and you have multiple investors over time, that is where this data can become useful as well to visualize. And you can always go back to data right there, view data. If you want to edit the interface, you can go to edit, and you can find here all the components of the interface. You can add elements here, but this video is outside the scope of exploring Airtable interfaces, and you can find lots of documentation online. That is really it for the fundraising CRM. You can find the link in the description. For any questions, feel free to leave a comment. Thanks for watching for now, and see you soon.